All right, good morning, everyone. I know a lot of people are on a tight timeline today, so we're gonna go ahead and get started pretty much on time. It looks like by my watch, 12:02 right now, so we're just gonna launch right into it. Welcome, of course, to the Google Analytics Moving Beyond Page Views webinar. This is a live replay of the speech that some of you may have seen at FitBlogin this year. So, of course, I'm happy to deliver that live for anyone who wasn't able to attend. Um, let's start off by talking about who I am and why you should care. I'm a certified Scrum Master and Agile Coach, which means that I spend my time helping people just like you optimize their workflow, their processes, so that they can spend less of their time doing things that aren't moving their business forward and more time doing the things that really matter. I have over 7 years in the software industry. I've worked with companies like Microsoft and Nintendo, helping them implement Agile. And of course, on the side, I'm a certified running coach with the Roadrunners Club of America. You can find me at Tim Woodbury, on Twitter, and also at Midpack Runner on Twitter as well, depending on what you're looking for. And before we move on, if you look in the bar at the bottom there, you'll see the bit.ly link there. That's a lowercase l in the second part of that, and that bit is that'll take you to the resources for this slide. Okay. So what's in it for you? Why do you want to watch this webinar? For that matter, why do you want to implement analytics? Today we're going to be talking about the what's and whys of web analytics, why you would want to concern yourself with the metrics and what they have to say. I'm going to walk you through one of the reports in the Google Analytics interface and just give you a sense of how to interact with it. I know a lot of people are very novice at this, and we want to make sure that you have the skills necessary not to just pull out specific pieces of data, but to really go ahead and investigate the interface and be able to play with it to answer some of the questions that you may come up with that I don't address here in this webinar, which brings us to the guide for asking the right questions. I'll start you off with some of the industry terms that we use to really talk about how do you investigate what's going to work for you and for your business or your blog. So why do web analytics? Well, Lord Kelvin was a physicist. He said if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. And I know if you're on this webinar, the odds are that you probably think that you have some room to improve. I know I have room to improve. And I know that at FitBlogin, when I delivered this speech, I don't think there was a single hand that wasn't up when I asked who had room to improve their blogs. So we all know that we need to be aware of constantly improving our user experience, make sure that our audience stays engaged with us, but we don't always measure what we're doing. So this whole talk came out of a discussion I had at a previous year's FitBlogin where somebody had asked, you know, I want to change my posting schedule. I'd really like to drop down to, you know, just a couple times a week, but I don't know how my audience will respond. And I said, well, what does the data tell you? And they couldn't really answer it. So that's where analytics will really help you. It'll help you examine, you know, what is happening on your blog to be able to make decisions that are backed up by the data that you have, by what your users are actually doing. It'll let you measure your work's effectiveness. It'll show you how well what you're doing is working. It'll highlight opportunities for growth in your business, and then it'll help you identify where things go wrong. So, you know, when you're talking about that posting calendar, for instance, it might be that you look at where your audience is coming from, the days that they are most active on your blog, and you only post on those days. That's an opportunity for you to cut out some of the work you're doing that isn't attracting the audience, isn't keeping them there. And of course, if things blow up, you'll be able to go back and figure out, you know, where some of your content isn't lining up, things like that. So we're going to go ahead and look at the Google Analytics interface. What you see right here in front of you is when you first open up Google Analytics, you land on this dashboard. This is the audience overview, and there are two different pieces to this. On the top you see, of course, the chart, which right now is showing visits, the number of visits over a selected period. And then in the bottom there are a couple of different metrics, so I just want to highlight some of those. We've got visits, of course, which represents the number of visitors that arrived at your site, or rather, the number of times your site was accessed more accurately. Because if you look at this unique visitors metric right next to it, to the right of that, you'll find that those are the number of people that we can uniquely identify as having arrived on your site. So of these 766 visitors, somewhere around 150 of them visited your site more than once. That's why your visits and your unique visitors don't match up. There are some caveats to that, and I'll get to those at the end of the presentation, but those are what those two generate. For all intents and purposes, that's what that means. And then, of course, below visits, the page views represent the number of pages that were loaded on your site. And you may know some of these metrics already. You may even use some of them to kind of evaluate where you are. But I just want to go into them for people who don't have that experience before. So the number of pages people loaded. So it looks like on average during the period in question, with 700 unique visitors, that it's somewhere on the order of 2 pages per visit. And you can see actually it expands over here in that pages per visit section right to the right of that to be it's 1.56 pages per visit. So there are some people who are only loading 1, some people are probably loading 3, but you know, you take the outliers out of there and you average it, and you know, that's the number of pages that most people are loading. Now the higher that number is, of course, the better, but there are ways that you can improve that. And we won't specifically talk about those. That's kind of what the metrics are telling me to do with this. And then, of course, below page views, the average visit duration. The big catch here with average visit duration is that Google only logs this for visits that hit more than 1 page. So anything that's bringing this pages per visit number down, any of those single page visits, because a lot of people open up like a new tab, and I'm sure you've done it as well. Like you open up an article that you intend to read, and then you never get around to reading it, and you know, maybe you get sucked into a meeting with a colleague or something like that, and it sits open for a long time. Google discards that data because we'd rather skew low than skew high, right? I'd rather say, you know, that visit duration was lower than it is, then, you know, I opened it up and went to the bathroom and drove out and got lunch, and now my visits look like, you know, somebody's been on my site for an hour. And that's not really the case. They're not active, they're not engaged during that time. And finally, the bounce rate, which correlates with what we just talked about here. The bounce rate is the number of people who show up on your site, read a single page, and then go straight away. They don't link to other content that you've written. They don't explore your website, your about page, your contact page, none of that. They're just in and out. And generally speaking, those types of visits are more common from sources like Reddit, like Dig, back when Dig was still popular, and you know, social traffic a lot of times will raise your bounce rate. So these are people who aren't very engaged with your content, don't want to learn more about what you have to say. There's certainly a debate to be had about the value of that traffic, but that's generally speaking the metrics that we're going to be accessing throughout this webinar. Now, I want to take you a little bit deeper and talk about reports. There are over 100 different reports in Google Analytics, and we're going to look at just a couple of these. We're going to look specifically for this webinar, we're going to look at one report. We're going to look at the all traffic report. So if you open up, if you're following along, open up your traffic sources menu along the left side of the page, drop down to the sources menu and click on that if it's not already open, and then all traffic right there, the highlighted bit, is going to show you everybody who's arrived at your page. And what you'll see is a view that looks just like this. We're going to talk about the two different pieces of this view in depth and give you a sense of what you can do with each of them. There is, of course, on top, we have the graph view, which will show you some of your metrics plotted against time, how those things change over a period of time. And then on the bottom, we have the table view. And we're going to dig into each of these. The table view will give you a better view on your data, but we'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to start with the graph view because that's a little more compressed. It's a little more simplistic. So we'll take a look at that one right away. Then the first thing to notice is that we have the option to view this data on a whole scale of granularities. We can look at this data broken up by day, by week, or by month. And now when you're looking at these three charts here, the top one, they all represent the same period. They represent the year 2011 on midpackrunner.com. This was the first year that I was in business, as it were. It's the first year that this blog was live. So the problem with this level of this day level of granularity for a period like a year is that there's a lot of noise. You can see a lot of these spikes. Things change very rapidly, and it's really hard to see what the trends are with that data when you're busy trying to weed through all the spikes. So I recommend for this, when you're looking at data granularity, if you're examining a period of anything less than 3 months, day is probably fine. I would use day for anything generally up to a quarter of the year. Whereas for things, typically, I mean, as you can see in the second chart, there's not a lot of noise broken down by week, that same year broken down by week. So I really think, if you're looking at a period of 3 months to a year, a week is probably fine. If you're going beyond a year, Google Analytics will store 25 months worth of data. If you are willing to spend a little bit more, on the order of $150,000 a month, so a little bit more. This is for enterprises. They'll store that data for something like 36 months. It's nothing that any of us in this webinar will ever need to worry about. And if you do, you should probably be teaching and not listening to me. So if your visits are below, typically I think it's, well, technically it's 10 million events a month, which can mean a lot of different things, but for most of us, let's call that page views. If you're below 10 million page views a month, you'll get about 25 months worth of data retention. So if you're going beyond that year, you probably want to set your granularity to the month level so that you get that data smoothing. You don't have as much noise to worry about. So again, day between 0 and 3 months, between 3 months and a year, set it to week, and then between a year and that 25-month cutoff, I would set that to the month granularity. But beyond that, we can also compare multiple date ranges. So we're used to seeing what we had back here in this slide. This is looking at one date range. It's looking at the year of 2011. And that's typically how you'll view these reports. But if you are looking for some visibility into how am I improving month over month, you have the ability to click on this compare to checkbox when you're looking at the date drop-down and to select a different range. So here I'm comparing the month of June, effectively, the end of May to the end of June, to the end of June through the beginning of July. So the months of June to the months of July. Where July, in this case, is the orange line, and June is the blue line, is represented by their respective colors in that date picker chart. And you'll find this on every report that you deal with, a date. You will find that you have the ability to do this comparison. So if you look at the data month over month, now we're analyzing trends, you can see that there's a weird spike at the end of July compared to June. I mean, by and large, the traffic was more or less the same, but then I have a pretty large jump toward the end of the month. And I have to be honest, I don't really know what happened there. It's been, this was July 2011, and I can barely keep track of what happened last week, July 2013. So if I didn't have this little note, this annotation that I left myself, I'd be looking at this data historically and wondering, well, why would that traffic have jumped? What did I do differently that brought that up? And there's no way for me to repeat that process unless I understand where that data came from. So we can find out what happened by clicking either on this little down nubbin here in the middle or directly on that quote icon. You'll notice, if we go back for a second here, that when I'm looking at the date ranges compared, that I have no insight into the annotations. So when you're looking at more than one date range, you're not going to see your annotations because it's not clear to which timeline they would belong. But as you change this then so that you're only looking at a single date range, that annotation shows up. And of course, we can click on that, and let's see what happened in July there. So as I expand that, I can see that, at the time I knew this was an aberrant spike. I knew this was data that I wouldn't likely repeat, and I left myself a little note to say that this was the day that the folks at Runner's World, Mark Remy and oh, for goodness sake, from Bart Yasso, yeah, good one to forget, of the 800s. They blogged and tweeted this. I was driving across the country at that time, and I stopped and ran with them, and they, wrote about it on the blog, and so that drove a lot of traffic to the site. Now, if you look past that to the tail of this a little bit, on the right side, you can see that I didn't do a very good job of capitalizing on that traffic spike. The traffic spiked for the one day. I didn't actually expect them to say anything about it on the blog, and so I missed the opportunity to convert some of those people into subscribers. But that's a good learning experience, right? That's what this data tells us. So the next time that I see this kind of traffic spike, I need to go in and I need to say, okay, how do I convert those people to subscribers of this blog? And if I didn't have that annotation, I wouldn't be able to go back and look at this data and really understand what had happened there beyond, there was a traffic spike, but the why would be completely lost to time. So actually, I'm going to go back here for a second, and we're going to jump through this again. Now, to leave these annotations, which is kind of the important part, and I don't know why I didn't put that in the slide deck, all you need to do is click on, not actually click, but click on the node that represents the date that you're interested in. In this case, it was this highlighted node here, right, which you've seen a couple times now. You double-click on that node, or expand this drop-down the way that we did by clicking on the down arrow in the center of the graph view. That'll open up the annotation node. If you click on this create an annotation, create new annotation along the right side, just above where it has that email there, that will give you the option to write down the little annotation that you have for the day, blogged by Runner's World, mentioned on Copyblogger, whatever your event is that drives that traffic. When I started out, when I was just writing new articles, I would leave annotations for days that I had posted the new article along with the title of the article that I posted, and that would give me a sense of what some of the topics were that people were more interested in than others, and it would give me the opportunity to really analyze things like, was it the way that I wrote the headline? Was it the specific topic? Stuff like that. So there are a lot of different ways to use those, but to add them, just double-click on the date you're interested in, and then type what you need to type, and that'll be your annotation. And that's the graph view. So there's nothing else really to worry about with that. If there are any questions, of course, at any time throughout this presentation, I'd ask that you just tweet me. That's @Tim_Woodbury, or use the FitAnalytics hashtag, and I'll be sure to answer those as they come in. So we're going to talk about the table view then, which is the second piece of all the reports that you're going to look at. There are two different pieces to the table view that we need to talk about. The first, along this left-hand side, are the dimensions. Now, when we talk about a dimension in the context of analytics, what we really mean is anything that you need a word to describe. In this case, the source, where did the traffic come from, the medium, which is kind of a general category for the traffic source. So Google is organic for organic search. You see that repeated with Yahoo and Bing. And then, of course, from websites that I have links posted on or where they have linked to my content, you'll see this referral show up in there. That's anything. We'll talk a little bit more about those mediums, but there are a whole bunch of things that go into this. Keywords, how are people finding your site? What languages do they speak? Any place that you would need a word to define what it is that you're looking at, those will typically show up along the leftmost column of your table. And then the other part of this are your metrics. Those are all the numbers, the visits, the page views per visit, the visit duration, the bounce rate, all the stuff we talked about in that first slide way back. Those numbers, anything you can apply a number to, is a metric. Anything else is going to be a dimension. So we're going to take a look first at how we can shift some of these dimensions to really expand upon the knowledge that we have of how people are finding our site. So up in this bar here, I'm going to click the little other link. Once that expands, I'm going to want to go ahead and expand the traffic sources link and then click on keyword. This is going to tell us when people were searching for us on Google, Yahoo, Bing, Ask, so on and so forth, what words were they using? How were they finding our site? Or more accurately, what were they looking for such that we can determine, are we meeting that need? Is there content that we're posting that does in fact engage these people and entice them to convert to regular visitors? And once you click on that keyword selection there, you'll see along the left side our dimension has changed. Now we have this keyword up here where we used to have source and medium. And down the side here you can see things like a Pinot recipe, race bibs, the Barkley Marathons, which is a whole different topic entirely, but one of the things that I wrote about a little while ago. And there are a couple of other keywords here that, now when I'm looking at the keyword view, you can see along the bottom we're really only looking at 10 rows of data. I typically would expand this to about 50. I think much more than that, and you suffer the long tail effect where you know, you get down to like keywords with a single visit or 2 visits. Typically speaking, your keywords are kind of clustered, and they don't tend to, once they start to fall off, it's not really worth your while to continue to look at them. It's a little bit of noise data. So I would set that to 50, and then we're going to look at this view in a different light. We've got a couple of different options up here at the top. You can see we start in the table view, but we also have the option of setting this to be, you know, a bar chart, a pie chart. We can set this, if you're a statistician and you're familiar with this view, you can work in the pivot view. But what we're really interested in right now for this view, I think the most helpful way to look at this is by clicking on this little tag cloud icon, and you'll recognize this as a blogger from, you know, say the tags that you have on your website or your categories. Right? Once we open this, you can see all those keywords laid out in a tag cloud, but the problem is this not provided keyword is outshadowing all of these. So this is a, there was an update to Google now I think probably about 2 years ago, where anybody who signed into a Google account, a Gmail account, or some other form of Google account, when they run a search, that data isn't recorded. It's listed as this not provided. And Google pitched that as a way to increase user security. Personally, I know that a lot of marketers think that when you're talking about Google Analytics, all of the data in Google Analytics is collected completely anonymously. There's no way to trace back, your search on, so right down here, the New York City Marathon lottery odds. There's no way to tie that to John Smith of Pensacola, Florida, right? There's just no way to do it. So there are a lot of people in the marketing world who certainly think that, and in the analytics world, that think that by adding this garbage keyword, it was only marginally useful for users, but it was certainly a big hit to anybody who relies on this data. So unfortunately, it is what it is. We're stuck in Google's ecosystem. So we need to go in and we need to find a way to filter that data out. And we're going to do it by using this little advanced link up here to provide a filter, a search filter for this data. And you have a lot of different options in here. We'll talk about what they are in a second. But this leads us into the topic of audience segmentation. This is a way of breaking down your audience into meaningful segments depending on their behavior. For instance, somebody arriving at your site for the first time is going to behave in a different way than somebody who is a regular reader. And we want to make sure that we treat those groups differently. So we have ways to filter them out. And there are a whole bunch of different ways that you can segment your audience. Take, for instance, you could set this up so that it only shows you the data from people who already know your brand, people who came in by searching for, in my case, say, mid-pack runner or agile blogging, or some variation on your trade name, right, or your blog name, how you're doing business, people who are already familiar with you, or, again, segmenting them out by interests, people who are interested in running, arriving at mid-pack runner versus people who are interested in some of the dog training stuff that I occasionally write on there as well. So we're going to start, in this case, since the goal is to remove that not provided that Google seems to stick us with, we have to go to this first little drop-down, and we're going to click on exclude. We're going to exclude the keyword not provided. They also use not set, so we'll find out how to get rid of that, but we want to set this first block to exclude. And of course, with this, the second one, I'm not going to expand it because it's already on what we want. It's already on keyword. But you have the option, in this case, of removing or including or removing any dimension, any metric that you can show in this report. So if I want to see just people who speak French and how they interact with my website, I can do that. If I get an inordinate number of visitors from Japan and I don't want to see their behavior because I don't believe it's indicative of anything, then I can remove them. If I want to see just people who stay on my site for more than 5 minutes, I can do that. There are a whole bunch of different ways to break this up. But we're going to leave it on keyword for now. And then finally, we have a whole bunch of different options for how we specify our filter. In the case of this dimension selection, we can look for things that exactly match what we're looking for. So mid-pack runner would match only things that only search terms that were mid-pack runner, but not mid-pack runner running and not running mid-pack runner. We're going to skip over regular expressions because that's a topic unto itself, that regexp. Ignore that one for now. There's a complex set of language features that you can use to do more specific matching, but we won't need that for this. And then, of course, begin and ends with are exactly what they say. In this case, mid-pack runner, mid-pack space runner would be for begins with, would match mid-pack runner, would match mid-pack runner running, but would not match, running mid-pack runner, whereas ends with would would match that one and would not match any of the previous ones. And then containing, which is the most liberal of those. Containing will match mid-pack runner anywhere within a statement. So if I put in, running mid-pack runner runs, we would find that in the same way that we would find it at the beginning or the end of the statement. If it's anywhere in there, we're going to find it. We know what we're looking for. We're looking for not set and not provided. So we're going to click on begins with, and then in the text box to the right, we're just going to go ahead and type in open parentheses not, because that's the beginning of both that not provided and the not set that Google uses to tell us that they're not going to tell us anything. And once we're done with this, we click on the apply button, and you'll see in a second here that really changes that tag cloud around. It really does make a huge difference to how this appears, right? Whereas previously we were seeing like not provided as the dominant search term, which is completely useless data, and we have no idea of the relative sizes of the rest of the searches that are happening here. When we move forward to, let's see, oh, we're going backwards, beg pardon. Let's see what we can do to jump past all this. When we move forward to the next set of tag clouds here, with that removed, you can see that now it's actually much clearer what people are searching for. So I was looking at this in a time period where it seems that people really are interested in the New York Marathon. I believe I had this set for sometime in February, thereabouts, and I get a big spike every single year. I wrote one year about the changing Boston and New York Marathon qualifying times. I believe that was back in 2011, and of course now that every year I get a spike in traffic when people start to search for those. I also have a couple on here. Pinole recipes is probably the next biggest one. And then there's a whole smattering of other ones. A couple that seem to indicate that people are interested in what do they do with their race bibs. A few that are based on dogs. So it's a good way to really get a quick sense of what people are looking for when they arrive at your site. And that gives you the opportunity to then tailor your site to the people who are already finding you, or you can make the decision to go after people for search terms that you really wish they would find that they're not finding you for now. And there's one more thing I want to do. So we're going to go back to that original table view. We can add on this. We're looking right now just at a single dimension, but we're going to go ahead and look at a secondary dimension as well. We're going to open this up and expand the visitor tab and then drop into visitor type. So now you can see we've got a couple of different, it adds this secondary dimension up here. And we're going to look at two different entries for each of these things. There are two categories, visitor type, new and returning. And you'll see Google appears twice, which separates the behavior of the new visitors and the returning visitors, so a much lower bounce rate on the returning visitors and a much higher average visit duration. And then again with direct traffic, you'll start to see some of those in there as well for new and returning visitors. So if we picked as a secondary dimension keyword, then we'd have Google and every keyword that had been searched on Google, and Bing and every keyword that had been searched on Bing. So it really expands the length of your table, but it gives you a sense of, it gives you the opportunity, rather, to look at these things kind of auto-segmented by some of the default dimensions. People who are coming from Google and only speak English, just as an example. And of course, this visitor type column is the new one that we just added. And again, if you take a look at this, you'll see that organic search, the new visitors from organic search tend to bounce much more quickly, whereas returning visitors stick around for a little while. So that's kind of the fundamental use of this secondary dimension. And now I want to talk a little bit about mediums. This is something that we're going to go through pretty quickly. There are 3 built in. This is mediums we talked about before. They're categories. They are ways of grouping websites to give you meaningful insight into where your traffic is coming from. By default, Google gives you 3. They give you organic for anything that is a search engine. They give you referral, which is any link posted anywhere on the internet that comes back to your site. And then they use this none in parentheses to represent people who arrive at your site directly, either by clicking on a link in a document, a PDF, or a Word document, for instance, where we can't run Google Analytics. They get to that by typing in your URL directly into their browser or clicking on a bookmark. That's direct traffic. I think the other 2 are reasonably self-explanatory, but we can do better than this. So, for instance, as it stands, referral traffic will encompass everything from that link that I got from Runner's World a while ago to any sort of like article aggregation sites are referrals, and then of course the 2 big ones, which or more than that, I guess, Twitter and Facebook come in as referrals. And there's no meaningful way to say what's my social traffic outreach if we're treating that as referral traffic. There's no way to look just at Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook without doing some advanced filtering. So we can do better than that. I want to introduce you guys to the Google URL Builder, the link builder. This is a tool that Google published to make it easy for you to update your web links, the things that you're posting on your social sites in particular, to make sure that you understand where this traffic is coming from. And there's a link to it over here on the right. There's also a link in the resources page. So if you're watching this and you've already gone and loaded up the resources page, you've probably seen that as well. So what I do with this is when I'm getting ready to publish, I've published a new article, I drop that into the website URL field here, and then under campaign source you want to enter where is this thing coming from, what's the name of the website that this is coming from. So I'll start by doing Facebook in that campaign source, and then we'll talk a little bit about where those all come from. The ones you need to worry about are source, medium, and campaign name. Campaign name is required on this form. It is not technically required by Google, but we'll use it anyway because you won't use the web form. So let's talk about what each of these is. The source, of course, is what is the website for. Again, I'll add in Facebook for that typically when I come through and do a social pass. Medium is what category does it fit into, and there are a couple that I recommend. Social is the one that I use for all of my social media, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, on and on and on. Any place that I'm going to post this to something that I would consider social media, it gets that little social tag. If you're using email marketing, Aweber, Constant Contact, MailChimp, some of the other solutions out there, anytime you send an email blast, consider putting the email into the medium before you put the link in your document so that you understand that that's where that is coming from. And then, of course, because otherwise it'll show up as a referral from one of these sites and their redirects. And then if you write an ebook, a PDF, I'll go ahead and tag all my links with this docs medium and use for the source the name of the document that I'm publishing this link to. And then campaign, again, it's technically required for the tool, but it's optional. So typically, unless I have reason to do otherwise, I'll just use this none. I don't do a lot of marketing campaigns, but if you were running banner ads, for instance, this would be a place where you would put the name of the banner ad or something that told you which one it was, so that you understood where that traffic was coming from. And so the way that my workflow works with this tool is that I'm going back here for a second, I'll publish a new post, pop the link to the post into the website URL field, and then under campaign source, I'll go ahead and put in Facebook, under medium, social, and under campaign name, that open parens, none, close parens thing, so that I know that it's going to take it. Click on submit, and the link builder will give you a link that you can use to track more advanced data in Google Analytics. And so once you pull that link out, I pop that link into like bit.ly or another link shortener and then post it to Facebook. And then what I'll do is come back to Link Builder, change the source to Twitter, and then hit submit, pop it into a link shortener, and then that link goes to Twitter. And that way I'm tracking all of my traffic in a way that tells me where it's actually coming from. So I recommend that you adopt that workflow. We're going to finish up here by talking about a few caveats, and then I'm going to go briefly into asking the right questions for your business. The first thing to know is that Google Analytics is fundamentally a broken yardstick. It can't tell you exactly how many visitors you've had. It can't tell you exactly what percentage of visitors are new or returning. It can't tell you exactly how long visitors are spending on your site. We talked a little bit about that before. And if you're starting to see the trend here, it's that Google operates on the basis of a couple of different things. Things like visitors who don't use JavaScript or visitors who clear their cookies will skew your data. But the good news is that most of those visitors will behave in the same way time and time again. So we really don't want to measure specific metrics. Trying to gauge the performance of your website based on metrics specifically is going to lead to a little bit of frustration. And here's a good example of why this doesn't work. If my wife and I are looking at taking a trip, I'm at work, she's at work, I visit this website, this travel website, and I send her a link to the hotel. She views it on her work computer. Now she's a second visitor, even though really as a couple we're one customer for that resort. We take that data and we pull it up on our phones coming home from work, and that's a second view for each of us. So now we're 4 visitors. And then we arrive home, we're on a separate computer, and we sit down together and we pull up the website and we view that link and we book our hotel. Now we're 5 visitors, but we're really only 1 customer. So again, that data is skewed, but that's probably the way that we book all of our vacations, right? And that may be the way that other visitors do that as well. So it's at least the same broken yardstick. It's off by the same amount, and the trends are still meaningful in that regard. So Google Analytics can tell you, though, things about what are the trends happening with your traffic over time. Is it increasing, and then by what %? And that's meaningful data. It can tell you what paths are visitors taking through your site to find your data, and it can tell you, as we saw before, how are they finding you. There are a lot of things that it can tell you specifically, but the important point here is that this is all about trends and less about the specific metrics. And finally, caveat 2, just because the data is there does not mean you have to check it. I know we all fall victim to this at some point or another. It's interesting to see what people are doing on our sites, and we really want to know, but at the same time, you know, we need to be a little bit careful about that. It's like stepping on the scale every single day. I don't know if you guys have heard this before. They say don't do it because your weight fluctuates day to day. And if you recall that chart, the daily data over a year, from way back at the beginning of the presentation, there's a lot of noise in that data. So there's a solution to this. You're going to drive yourself nuts if you try to check it every day. Under each report, you can see here we're in audience overview. There's this bar that gives us the option to click on email here and set up alerts. Rather than asking the data, what's happening, what's happening, what's happening, we can wait and tell the data, have Google Analytics tell us what the data is at a specified time. So I might sit down every Sunday morning and open my email and look at just the charts that I have deemed to be appropriate to my business, right? So if you click on the email button, you get this modal dialog that pops up. You enter the in the to field the email address that you'd like to receive that from, and then you can change the frequency. I usually think for most things weekly is good to receive that data on whatever day of the week you want, weekly for 6 months, a year, whatever that is. And that way you're only really looking at this data when things may have changed, right? You're not killing yourself with signing in every 5 minutes to see if somebody's reading your new blog post now, because it just doesn't happen like that, unfortunately. And finally, let's talk about asking the right questions. I've given you a lot of tools for examining the data and looking at those different charts and reports, but if you don't know what questions to ask from the data, then in a lot of ways, analytics is a waste of time. So when you start to think about what you need for your business, what questions you want to ask of that data, you want to start with the objectives and the key results. These are your high-level business objectives. Think to yourself, what will move my business forward? For instance, I'd like to attract more commenters on my blog. I really feel like engagement is low, and I want to see people commenting and sharing this stuff on Facebook and on Twitter. That's an objective and key result, right? Like that's the objective is to get more audience engagement, right? The result is that your audience is engaging with you more. And you take those, you build a list of those, and you convert them into these key performance indicators, which will correlate more or less with the reports that you can get out of Google. You may need to span multiple reports, but for what most of us will do, we'll be able to get that data from a single report. So if I'm trying to determine whether I am actually improving audience engagement, then I need to look at the data and say, what actions does this data imply I should take? Am I getting closer to my goal? And when you're setting your KPIs, you need to think about ratios, percentages, averages. A lot of people will say, we got 10,000 page views this month. And that's great, but it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't imply an action, right? 10,000 page views this month is a 10% improvement over last month. That gives you a little bit more data that you can go on. That actually might imply some action that you might want to take, whether that's congratulate yourself for improving your data or your page views by 10%, or that you need to work a little harder on audience retention. Whatever that is, acquisition and retention. Just remember that you don't want to set too many of these. You want to make sure that they are the ones that there's a lot of stuff we can measure, but you want to make sure that what you're measuring is actually key to your business. So anytime that you ask a question, you want to make sure that when you have an answer, that there are steps you can take to act on that data. And this could be a topic in and of itself, but unfortunately we're going to have to leave it there. We're running a little low on time. I want to wrap up with this quote from Jim Stern, who is the founding director of the Web Analytics Association. And I'll let you read this for yourselves, but what Jim is really getting at here, what he's driving at with this comment, is that most of us right now are logging in, we're looking at our analytics data, and we're asking ourselves, what is our audience doing right now? And that's usually where we end with things. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but we can do better than that. I know that the people watching this webinar are smart, capable people. And once we have that data, we're able to take that and turn it into actions that will help us improve the way that we do things. To not waste time on Instagram if Instagram isn't driving traffic to your website. If you enjoy it, that's certainly one thing, but for me, I tried Pinterest for a while with Mid-Pack Runner, and the return on that time that I was investing was very, very low. Definitely not worth what I was putting into it. So that having the data gave me the ability to opt out of doing that work. And fundamentally, that's really what this is all about, right? And most of us aren't doing a lot of outside marketing beyond just the blog, but the data is there, and if you decide at some point that you do want to expand into any sort of data analysis for your email marketing campaigns, things like that. Knowing how to interpret that data will really help you move forward with a much shallower learning curve than if you're sort of taking a lot of guesses, uneducated guesses, and just hoping something sticks. And it backs up those decisions when you've made them as well. So that's really the point of Agile. That's the reason that I talk about Agile blogging. It's the notion that we want to fail as quickly as possible so we don't keep wasting time on things that don't work. And one of the core components of that is being able to measure how the things that we're doing are working. And that's really what this webinar is all about. So at this point, if anybody has any questions, I will end the webinar in about another 5 minutes. I know people are kind of catching this in between bouts of work. So if there are questions, I will be here. Just tweet me at Tim_Woodbury, and you can use the hashtag #FitAnalytics, and I will be here for about the next 5 minutes answering questions. You can download the slides and a set of resources for this talk at the link below, and again, that's a lowercase l, not a capital I, in the second half of that link, right after the 8. So thank you all for being here today for this webinar. I hope that this helps you move your blogs and businesses forward a little bit, and I hope I'll see most of you back online.